We welcome our guests Doug and Wendy Avery. They came close to losing everything a few years ago. The farmers from Grasmere in Marlborough were hammered by drought for 8 long years. Doug watched day after day as the sun rose in a relentlessly blue sky and the land dried up. And there were the winds. We know those nor'west winds. And as the farm dried up, so too did the bank account and eventually Doug's hopes and ability to function. He began drinking heavily, withdrawing from life and shutting out Wendy, his wife, business partner and mother of their 3 children. It was the persistence of one stock agent who got Doug out of the house to a seminar which changed his and their lives. The farm's fortunes turned around, but more importantly, Doug's mental health, his top paddock, as he called it. A few years ago, he began visiting farms and communities to share his story, soon realising there were many farmers like him who struggled with depression. Wendy began talking with farmers' wives and partners too. Doug's written a book about weathering the challenges of life on the land. It's called The Resilient Farmer, and also raising the awareness of need for rural people to look after that top paddock has become a passion of his, indeed theirs. It's a pleasure to welcome Doug and Wendy to the Wellington studio. Good morning.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Good to meet you. I
Kathryn.
feel like I know you already from this book. At the outset, I think you know how much this matters by the reaction you've had. What is the situation we have? What do we know about how overrepresented our farming communities are in depression and terribly in our suicide statistics?
I started off trying to save my own poor soul. Then when that had happened, I started to realise that there was a lot of other people in this place. And then one day I was coming down to do my regular slot with Jamie Mackay on the country program, and I heard a woman talking about rural suicide, and I thought, this is not right. This is not absolutely right. People can learn to be happy like me. And I'd gone through this journey of completely really regrowing myself into a different kind of person. So that day I made talking about the rural suicide thing my topic of conversation, and the response was absolutely massive. And from that time on, I became increasingly aware, as maybe John Kerwin has done, if you disclose this stuff, all of a sudden you open the door. Hundreds of thousands of people go through this kind of stuff, but they've always felt closeted and they can't talk about it. So it's huge, and we could do so much. So that's why I'm in this process. I just want to use the learning processes that I've had, and hopefully the book will be a part of those tools for helping.
There's some obvious risk factors, aren't there? Elevated risk factors with farming, you know. There's the isolation in many ways, even in communities, you know. Huge financial costs and debts sometimes, and you can't just exit at the drop of a hat if something's not working. And then the other thing I think that you're big on, Doug, is getting guys talking to their partners.
Yeah, when I did the my tour in 2015, I started throwing the question in front of people, why do 3 times as many men commit suicide as women? And I'd ask that question to the women in the audience, who were typically only probably 25%, and I never had to press that question to get the answer. A woman would immediately put her hand up and say, Doug, it's because men don't talk. And then I can't remember exactly where I was, but one day I asked the question, and a guy down the back said, yeah, he said, and women, they talk and they talk and they talk, and that's why men commit suicide. And everyone had a good laugh. And one of the things that, some people said, oh, gee, that's a bit rich. We're talking about a really tough subject here. But one of the things that I started to realise is we actually have to start being comfortable in our own skins. And so there's a lot of energy at the moment going into what's the government not doing, and what is this organisation, DHBs or whoever, what are they not doing? This is an attitudinal change that we need in this country, and that is driven from inside individual human beings. I started using the word resilience, and people would say, oh, I hate that word, don't bloody well say that to me anymore. I can't find it. Those were people who aren't resilient. So building resilience when times are good is a fundamental part of creating a more dynamic place.
That moment, though, and Wendy, I very much want to hear your experience, and it's a heck of a farming and family story as well that you tell in this book. But let's stay with the most urgent stuff just for a moment. You've had a guy on the phone pretty desperate, and you've said what to him?
That happens to me all the time.
Go and talk to your wife.
Just talk to me, tell me about it. And one day I had a dairy farmer ring me at 9:30 on a Friday night, and he said, "Doug, I need to talk to you about myself." And when he had finished, I could have hung the phone up and gone away and pressed a couple of bales of wool down at the wool shed and come back, and he was still going. He's just downloading. And when he finished, I just asked him a simple question: "Have you told your wife?" Hell no. It's always hell no. I haven't told my wife. She wouldn't want to hear this stuff. And I said, "I think you're wrong." And so I tried to exclude Wendy from my shame, the shame that my life had turned into. And she refused to go, thank God. I think if she'd gone, that would have been the finish. And I said to this guy, "I want to help you, but you've got to actually do something. You've got to get off this phone call with me now, and I want you to tell your wife just what you've told me. And I'm going to ring back in 2 weeks' time and ask you what has happened." And I said, "There's one other thing." I said, "Is there anybody left in your life?" And he said, "No, I've told everybody to bugger off." I said, "I did that as well. Stock agents came, they did something wrong. Bank rang up, "No, don't talk to me, you're wrong." And everybody, I excluded everybody, just refused to answer the phone and what have you. This guy was in that place. I said, "You've got the hardest job of the whole lot." "Oh, what's that, Doug?" I said, "You've got to write a list with your wife when you've had a talk about that. She won't take the reaction that you think she's going to do. You've got to write a list of the people that you need back in your life, and you've got to ring them up one by one and tell them to come around and have a cup of tea." I said, "I'll ring back in a fortnight and you tell me how you've got on." I rang back in a fortnight. I said, "Doug, I'm living, the sun comes up in my life again. I've broken that hard, cold mental stare down that I've been living in." And, to be honest with you, I run across that all the time. When you do what John Kerwin's done and what I've done, and you admit your own frailty in this area, you open your heart to the world, and people just come up to you in the street. I went to the gym 2 days ago, and a guy walked in and he said, "You're Rob Avery." I said, "No, Doug." He said, "Doug, I've suffered and I've been down the same road." And he said, "I guess you're in the gym for the same reason as I am." And I said, "Yeah, too right, bud." And then he immediately opened up to me about his challenges, and he was coming right. He was good.
Wendy, for you, I mean, this has been a long journey together. We'll talk about how you first met. I think someone stood on the top of one hill and Yahoo'd across the other pretty much, wasn't it?
pretty much.
No, it was white baiting,
Kathryn.
sorry.
Yeah, it was.
But talk about the particular lonelinesses, and even when your friends and your family are supporting you, when your partner's gone to you, right? And you didn't leave. And I don't know why. I imagine you knew, the guy you knew was still in there somewhere. But tell me about the particular stresses of that.
I think, Kathryn, you live at your place of work, and I think that's a big issue. You can't just shut the gate at 5 o'clock at night and or catch a bus or drive somewhere else and blanket everything out. You're there at your place of business all the time, and there's no running away from it. And I think it's very easy to hide, very, very easy to hide. You've got plenty of scope there, and nobody sees you, so you're fine.
This is the pretense that you put up.
That's right.
And what were you going through inside?
I think we're all made differently. Obviously I was hurting, and but I coped with it probably extremely well.
Yes, you did.
Yeah. Like I say, I think we're all made differently, and some women can't. I've met many who can't, and they say, "Look, I'm going. I just can't bear it any longer."
What do they say that tends to occur? We've heard from Doug what he often hears from men in this situation, but for farming women or for rural women, what's common to their experience?
Their partners have stopped communicating, and they don't know how to start that communication. That to me seems to be the biggest issue.
Let's talk about how this came into your lives, because you both admit where you farm is a pretty ridiculous place to farm. But let's hear the story. It's got its challenges. The other thing I forgot to say out of the list of elevated risk factors, perhaps for farming people, is Mother Nature.
Mm.
You know, most of us can turn our back on our, you know, whatever it is that's dragging us down if we make that decision. Or, you know, can know when there might be an end to a pressure, perhaps, not always. But you were out there, weren't you? You were literally out there looking at the sky, and it would tease you with a few clouds, and then back to the big dry and back to the nor'westers. But tell us the story of the place where you farm, Averys, southeast Melbourne, near the saltworks, isn't it? For anyone who's used to the drive south, and up on the hills there.
Yeah, we neighbour Dominion Salt. We actually lease the property that's there, and when Wendy and I started farming the property with my parents, it was 206 hectares, and it's 2,400 hectares now. So I've always sort of had this incredible desire to build a great business, and you know, I sometimes wonder, you know, did I push myself too hard? I guess life is interesting. We're all made up different people, and you know, to me, success is important. And I think I look at that, and most of the people who come and talk to me about depression, they're not losers. They're people who have a high level of expectation around achievement. And I guess that drives me more to be in the space of helping those people, because, you know, I look at myself as a 14-point try. I was on the goal line, things were looking grim, and I was about to get completely swept off the park, and then a group of people got around me and helped me to learn how to play the game in a different way. We got an intercept pass scored at the other end, and rather than just accept that as being what's happened, I have a huge personal desire to return energy into that place. And not because, which are probably different for some people, because I think that'll necessarily bring me great fame, but I just know how bad that place is. And it's so destructive on those around you. This poor woman here, when you read my book, she's had quite a tough life. She deserves a great finish, don't you think?
There is going to be plenty of travel and stuff now. I think the kids have they taken over a lot of responsibility of the farm now?
Our oldest son, Fraser, runs the business. He's got 5 full-time staff. There's an amazing array of contractors and stuff, and it's a very, very high-performing unit. So you said before about Grasmere being a hell of a place to farm. A key part of this whole journey for us was to turn what was not right and start living in harmony with our community and with our environment and with the animals and with everything. And so this is a major story for converting our energy into looking, you said earlier on about the why in life. We were lucky enough to integrate into a sustainable farming fund project. And one of those people who came in was a guy called Graham Ogle from Hamilton. And the first time I met him, I told him it's best to get his sorry little bum on the plane and get the hell back to the Waikato where the grass was green, because he asked me why was I wasting all this feed on the hills? He sent me an email and said, I want to be involved in this project, Doug, and can I come back? And he did. And the first things he started asking is, why do you do this? And why do you do that? And he introduced me to a program, a computer program called FarmX, and him and Fraser got involved in that. And that started measuring and scenario creating for the whole business. And we suddenly realised we'd actually been playing the game in the wrong place. So I was a crash waiting to happen. I'd been taught by my father, if you work hard, you'll be successful. And Graham helped move us, and the starved reflexment soil conservation, which incidentally is one of the leading projects that the Sustainable Farming Fund's done out of 1,000, it became a cocoon to pull together science, take it out there onto the farm and create the environment. It was a multi-tiered process which included our social development. When there was a social scientist turned up, I thought, what the hell is she going to do? You know, like, get out of it, you know. But I didn't realise that the major part of my downfall was my lack of ability to integrate. So if you turn up to one of my speeches on my book launch, which I'm going to be doing shortly, don't expect me to be talking all about lucerne. I'll be talking about how you work your head, how you change your mind so that you become a critical thinker rather than just a general thinker, how you learn to integrate into this incredibly complex world and focus hourly and daily on the issues that matter. And that's what I've got to give.
So we had this acquisition of the neighbouring farms coming over a period of time, and I think in the end you bought your folks out as well. So for you, Wendy, I mean, I think initially you were going to take off to Auckland, weren't you? So you guys famously met in the white baiting, and but what was your story to becoming, a long-term farmer on the land as opposed to taking off to the big smoke?
I guess, once we'd purchased the property, it was ours, and we had a goal to work harder and get bigger, and we certainly did that. And I got very involved in the farm, and I know when Fraser came home and we offered him a job, I said, good, I'm not doing any more physical work. and I made a list of the things that I wouldn't ever do again, and I haven't to this day. I felt I'd done my share of the the hard physical grunt, and especially during that time when Doug was struggling, we had no other staff member on. And it was just Doug and I, and it was hard.
It was tough.
Yes, it was really tough.
Because we said this was a stressful place to farm. It is the particular land you were on before you did all this work and conversion and got all this science and advice in. It was a place where, as she can be anywhere, Mother Nature can be very harsh. And so it was year after year after year of drought that was sort of grinding on everybody, grinding on the finances. When did you begin to sense in Doug a shift from a man under pressure to a man in trouble?
Oh, probably 2 years into the drought, I guess. He really sunk. It was a gradual decline, a very gradual decline. And I tried earlier on to get help, for him to go to a doctor, and he didn't see that he had anything wrong with him. It was my issues, not his. And then it just the progression increased really, and to the point really where he had no desire to even get out of bed in the morning and even face what lay in front of him outside. It got that bad.
It's a really interesting thing. I had been an enthusiastic farmer and a contributor to our community. I was the chairperson of the Board of Trustees. I'd been 18 years on the Lions Club. Giving was a major core value. My father used to make the quote, we are each given two hands, one to feed ourselves and one to help others, or one to... And I was brought up in a family where that was a major part. And as things went wrong for me, I didn't understand that I had a problem. I knew that we had drought, but I just thought everyone else had turned really bad on me. And it was kind of an interesting thing. On the 14th of November, we had the mother of all earthquakes, and our massive great property down there, which we're so proud about, lifted up 2 metres and moved 5 metres closer to Wellington. We knew that it wasn't good while we were hugging each other in bed. We thought this is the mother of all earthquakes. And when I think about that, I spent the next 12 days trying to help our boys get the business going, and then we were so resilient there now that was going. But then I became terribly aware that the whole community was on its hands and knees, and I spent 3 or 4 weeks in the community digging people out of the back of their houses and from under the beds, helping to point them in the right direction, because I understand how to do that now. And what I actually found was about 7 people who were in a really bad way, and I spent a lot of time with those people. And one of the things that I've learned is that every human being is going to have trouble. It's going to come your way at some stage or another, but we need to spend a lot more time teaching people about how important it is that they manage stuff when the first strike happens, because all of those 7 people, the earthquake would strike 3. We talk about 3 strikes and you're out. So most of us can handle, a relationship breakup and then, you go to work and you're performing not so well, so you got the sack. This is what happens to people. So we need to actually, what I want to be is involved in teaching people about managing their lives in front of the problems. So resilience isn't something that you get up on Monday morning and say, I'm going to put myself through a resilience course this week and by Friday afternoon I'm going to be chipper. Resilience is actually a process that we can start to take on ourselves to create a whole different journey. So I said earlier in the interview that I focus on critical thinking. Resilience is about actually having the ability at the moment of crisis to understand where your best point of entry into what's going on is. And, I've got good at that now. I'm scared as hell of returning to where I've been.
That point, though, when you are gone from the ability to logically function like that, right? You're withdrawing. You're withdrawing into yourself. You're in trouble, was the word I used, and you're going to need outside help. At that point, Wendy, for you were covering for him, weren't you? I mean, people would ring and...
I was covering for him, and you made the point, Kathryn, you do need outside help, and that you can't do it on your own. And to get the person to realise that is very difficult.
You had to strategise. I mean, I'm just going to quote from the book here. You were drinking heavily,
Yeah.
Every night.
And you were strategising over how to mitigate that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And
cook dinner early.
But you see, because he didn't see that he had an issue. And it'll rain one day and everything will come right. But, of course, it isn't that simple.
What was your lowest point?
Oh, goodness.
Was there ever a point where you thought, actually, I can't keep doing this myself?
No, I don't think there was. I honestly don't think there was. I think I truly felt I had to keep going for Doug and the family.
She's one of 6 girls that were brought up in an incredibly strong family. And I got first pick.
Yeah.
But I think that just looking at how they've all performed in their lives, even the 6th pick would have been a good one. I'm a very lucky man because I think if I'd been successful in removing Wendy from my life, probably the next day I would have realised I had nothing else to live for.
When did you see things turn? And I know there's 2 stories here. There's some business solutions coming. There's a future for the business. There's some prospects to look forward to and to work through. And there's some, solutions is a big word to use when you're stuck, right? But when did you begin to see a turn in Doug?
He does say, and in the book, that, the day he went down to hear Dr. Derek Moot and North Canterbury was the turning point. It was the start of the turning point. He did come home and say, I truly think there's hope. Let's do this. And we put together a plan, and it took years, but that things.
But the hope, the possibility, the plan got you back on your bicycle.
Yeah, slowly.
So
very slowly.
How so? How slowly?
Oh, I think it was a probably a year that it took for
back and forth
But yes, yeah.
So writing this book with the amazing Marky Thompson, such a special lady, has been amazing for me because I actually started to really get a deep insight into all the stuff that John Kerwin talks about, hope and all that stuff. It's actually totally written over my recovery. So none of the stuff that we're putting out there is wrong. It's all right. But it has to be birthed from within yourself. So building resilience is a personal issue. Then it becomes a resilient individual can create resilient relationships, resilient families, resilient communities are built up of lots of resilient families. And, that was in the big earthquake in Seddon and Ward and down the coast. That tested our resilience to the umph like nothing ever has before. But we were lucky in that community that we've got a lot of resilient families, and we needed to coach everyone else back out to see the hope and the future. And the whole process has been unbelievable, really. I just feel so empowered now with the journey. I think as a couple we do to help grow a better process into the future to cope with the change and disruption that we will surely all face.
There's another big word, and I imagine everyone's experience of depression or the internal monologue in depression is possibly different from person to person, depending on personality. Because there's one guy I recall you talking to who told his story. He was right at the end of the road,
Yep.
right ready to do himself. And he saw a trapped animal.
Yep. Unbelievable. Yeah, that's in there. I've made references to some key points. That particular gentleman, and I'm very discreet about who I talk about, but he actually is one of the greatest agriculturalists in New Zealand and Australia, and he was on the point of termination and saw a Hereford steer with its head caught in the rails. He thought, I can't do this, we're leaving it like that. Put the gun down, went and relieved the animal and got a different take on life. And, one of my favourite quotes is, where is the wealthiest place in the world? And people say Shanghai and all sorts of other amazing, Dubai and everywhere. And I say, no, it's the cemetery. And one of my great dreams is to relieve the cemetery of its wealth. Let's start burying people who have put entire lives out to flourish in the world. And I think to myself now, if I died back at that time, it would have been a miserable funeral. You would have felt the anger coming up through the soil. It would have covered the bugger a bit deeper. But if I die now, people will think, gee, that guy actually relieved that misery, that hate, that anger, and allowed himself to give more into the world.
Do you remember what that guy said to you, though, his thought was after relieving the steer?
Yeah, I'm some use. And for me, people often ask, what pills did you go onto? I didn't take any pills because I refused Wendy's insistence that I go and get help. My pills at that time was alcohol, which made things worse. My cure was hope. And so, there's a lot of talk today about the health authorities failing in this area. This is actually about community awareness. This is about individual education. The whole debate is about changing ourselves to where we actually go back to creating value in individual lives. When I started, Dr. Amanda Lynn, she did a study on me. It's at Massey University and a few other people in Marlborough. And working with her, one of the most amazing women I've ever met, she helped me understand a lot about myself. And I think to myself, actually, that's what we all need to do. We need to spend a little bit more time teaching people how to manage themselves in this wonderful world. I use the word critical thinking. When you wake up every morning and you're grateful for what you got, you've got the door already open to have a better day. If you wake up thinking the government owes you this and everyone else is bloody down on you and that, you've actually got symptoms to me of a sad bugger like I was.
That question of, though, I'm not useless struck me because I know, excuse me, another of the real challenges of drought. And we were talking how the dairy price had an impact right on mental health and regrettably on suicides in parts of the country. We know that, right? But drought, it's often concern for the stock, when you can't feed your stock and the animal welfare, that really, that very important feeling of not getting to the point where you think you're useless. You're not useless. You're in an incredibly challenging situation. But it's that kind of internal monologue, right, that we've got to...
It is, and that's what, Doug did feel absolutely useless, and I was all the time saying, but you're needed here. We both needed to look after the stock, and we actually, we made a few fundamental errors. One was we kept our stock instead of destocking, and went out and bought, huge quantities of feed. And it's a pretty relentless task every day, trailing, load after load of feed out to stock, and that wears you down. And
so we changed our whole farming model, and the model that we have now would never do that. If we didn't have any feed, we'd be down at the beach swimming and fishing and looking after ourselves. And the big mistake I made at that time was I took the thing personally. No animal on my farm suffered. I took the whole process personally. I probably, in fairness, was still probably one of the best farmers in the area, but by the standard I'd set for myself in my life, and I go back to what I said earlier on, this isn't a disease of low performers. This is a disease of people who have high expectations and high levels of achievement. And when I came out and publicly told people I've been to this place, some of the top CEOs around New Zealand rang me up and said, can we help you in your cause? We'll come up with some money. And then when I eventually got through the process, I actually say, did you realise I'm on pills and, I'm in a really bad place myself right now? And it was kind of all that sort of stuff that I realised, gee, this is massive. It's absolutely massive. So in our wonderful world that we've created, we've got two growth industries, diabetes and depression. Wow, haven't we done well? So the conversation, and when I'm out talking this time, don't expect me to be talking about kilograms of dry matter per hectare. I'll be talking about mental, growing emotional intelligence. And that's the kind of stuff that we need to do.
Are we getting better in the primary sector? I know there was a new initiative announced at field days. There's the good doc who gets round and does the travelling around the country. I think Fonterra introduced a program for its drivers, because that's the person that many people will see regularly, and just hand out a card or ask the question. So are we getting better on the question of men under pressure? I've put that out as some indicators maybe we are. But Wendy, what about the women? There's tremendous support networks we know in our rural community, but is there enough for the specific challenges of this?
I think now there perhaps there is. Yes, I do. I think maybe it's in the book, but a couple of years ago I got asked by a group of women up in Gisborne to go up and speak to them, and it's just not my thing, public speaking. But I thought, yes, this is a group of women wanting to set up a network, and that's what I would have really enjoyed at the time when Doug was at his lowest. So I went, and I was absolutely stunned. Some woman had travelled 3 hours, and they said, one in particular had a tiny new baby, and she said, I've come just to hear you. She said, things are really bad at home. And I got talking to her personally afterwards, and I thought, yes, it was worthwhile going. But that's a really strong group that they opened up there for the rural woman, and I think women are better at asking for help, much better at asking for help, and I think, yes, we've come a long way.
Where do you start? If someone's listening today and either they're the spouse or the partner, or they're a farmer thinking, like you do, not me, it's every other bugger, and they have a moment, right?
Yeah.
Where do you start?
To me, you have to. It's a bit like anything, and probably by the time I got to my lowest point, you would have declared me as an alcoholic and all those sort of things. When I got to that place, it was the creation of hope. So I always tell people there are two key words with this process, and the first is a three-lettered word, and it's now. So in the process of learning about now, it's about learning. I'll get people and say to them that are in a really bad place, let's get 5 sheets of paper, and I want you to write down on the 5 sheets of paper the 5 things that are actually really giving you a hard time now. And they'll go through that process, and that's not usually too hard. And then I say to them, now, that word, that three-lettered word again, I want you to pick the worst one. and they'll look at them all and they'll think, actually, that one there they might have written it 4th or 5th, and then I'll grab the other 4 and throw them in the bin. I say, all we're actually going to do now is we're going to concentrate on doing something about this one. I'll give you a hand. This is what you can do for somebody that's in this place. Let's put some energy into just this one thing. I want you to forget about all these other things that you've got. We're going to concentrate now just on this. And that creates a 4-lettered word. When you've finished something, you start to feel some value. The word now was applied to the one thing. And you think, oh, actually, that wasn't as bad as I thought. So a depressed mind has got stuff coming in. I had all this stuff coming in, and there's nothing, anxiety, fear, anger, all of these things. They drain human batteries faster than any other emotion. A lot of these activists in the world know, create fear and you'll drain people down and they'll become easy meat to turn. I say to people, fear's got 2 meanings. Forget everything and run, or face everything and rise. And I went around that earthquake area saying, look, this is where we are, and we've all experienced fear. We've got 2 choices. And there was one lady who dislocated her shoulder, and she went down to the fire brigade, and she said to everybody, hey, Doug Avery just gave me this bloody one-liner. So one-liners are fabulous to bloody do it, to lift people up.
You said, have you said this to your wife? So that's one starting point, and quite possibly wife or partner's going, thank God he's finally talking. But alternatively, just talk to
somebody.
Google,
get it started.
Google, and you will get help.
There's online resources as well.
There's
Yeah,
great
lots of
online
resources, yeah.
resources, and you just need to keep going. And that was all before Google, when Doug was in that place. So I wasn't able to to sit at the computer and find help. But there's great resources out there now.
Just start today. Start. Thanks, both of you, very, very much. It is a really interesting read in many ways, being this honest, but also the whole amazing story of the farm and the family and everything else, but some really important messages, and thank you for coming in. The Resilient Farmer, Weathering the Challenges of Life in the Land, is by Doug Avery with Margie Thompson. Doug has been my guest along with Wendy Avery. Thank you both very much.